It's all about being happy. If I wasn't happy coming to work, I surely wouldn't be doing it. The last thing you need is to find out after you've closed and you've spent all this money on something, which is maybe your largest transaction you'll ever make, that you don't own it.
From your kind of trips, what has been your favorite
one? So just in terms of adventure kind of trips, or just normal travel?
Yeah, just like kind of your big adventure stuff, like your...
They're so different. We're big Africa fans.
Oh, okay.
So we've been to Africa a lot, and that's our favorite place to go. And so, climbing Kilimanjaro is kind of the adventure in in Africa, Tanzania. So I think that one, that trip really is important to us because it was really the first trip we'd ever been on where we did something adventurous. Up until then, it was like go to the beach, go play golf, whatever. So that was the first trip. That was way back in 2005.
Did it change your mindset about what travel is for you guys?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
It changed everything.
Yeah.
Because I was 50 at the time. So, our idea of vacation was going to Destin. Until then.
Destin, get a sunburn, and head back to the beach
beer,
after 4.
Play golf. It was life changing, because we really hadn't traveled outside the country at all until then, and so that was kind of an eye-opening experience. Not to mention it was quite a challenge physically for us because back then we had never done anything, remotely close to that. So. I think that's probably the most important experience of our lives. Really, it changed a lot.
Yeah, there's something to be said about so I did a lot. It was actually funny. I was talking to my son this morning about. He said, "Where have you been?" And I did a lot of missions work early on in my teenage / college age. And he's like, "Where have you been?" And I started listing it off, and I was like, wow, I really have. It's China, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong, Japan, Mexico, and it's just there's something to be said for in the journey when you're doing more adventurous things. There is also very hard things about that.
Right.
There's inconveniences. The travel does not, going to Kilimanjaro and hiking it didn't necessarily wasn't as pleasant as the trip to Destin. I'm assuming. I'm sure you could just tell stories, but in the struggle, you almost come alive and you begin to breathe of no, this is the journey is what it's about.
Right.
So you kind of started on that journey of going on doing some more adventure stuff. Where else did you kind of springboard off of that after that trip?
Well, so that was supposed to be a one-off thing.
You're one time, and then we're going back to Destin.
Going back to Destin. And really, it's one of those, when you do something like that, when you get immediately after you're through, you say you'll never do it again because it isn't pleasant all the time. Now, there's fun times on it for sure, but when you're up there pretty high and it's cold and you're in a tent and it's dark and you got to get up at midnight to walk uphill for hours, that's when you start questioning what in the heck, why am I here? Why am I doing, I could be on a sailboat somewhere. But after you get back, after you get home, the mind's funny, you'll forget about the hard parts and you'll remember the great parts. And so that makes you want to do it again. Yeah. And plus the kind of the feeling of accomplishment when you've never really done anything, I wasn't in the military. I didn't play college football. I didn't really have that experience of being on a team and doing something really hard.
Yeah.
And so, not that Kilimanjaro is anything close to that, but still, that feeling of accomplishment was unique.
Yeah.
We'd accomplished things in business, but not really from a physical standpoint. So that kind of makes you want to do the next adventure, whatever that is. And it just so happens that Kilimanjaro is one of the 7 summits. It's the highest mountain on that continent. And so we decided to try to climb as many of those as we could, which was a really perfect plan because you can take them one at a time. You can go from easiest to hardest. And when you reach your limit, you know you've reached your limit and you quit,
Yeah.
And so that was really what started us on several years there of seeing some of the greatest places. I mean, we did Russia, we did Antarctica together.
Wow.
Places that we would have never gone. We would have never gone to the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. We'd have never gone to Antarctica. We'd have probably never gone to the middle of, the Andes in Argentina. So where those mountains are is where you have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really the greatest thing that ever happened to us.
Man, that's incredible. And I love what you said. You said we started on a journey with the idea of we're going to do this, but you don't have to do that all.
Right.
And the progression of like, hey, this is the easiest one, this is the hardest one.
Right.
And you can find your limit. And I think sometimes like I've literally never thought of this on the journey of business or life, of like setting a scale of hardness or grade. Like my goal is ultimately here, but just because if I don't arrive at this very, very high goal doesn't mean that the journey, like I could find that 4 steps in, I'm happy, I'm content, this is my level of my, balance of life. And if I were to go to the next step, I'd have to sacrifice other things that I don't want to. So I'm going to be okay here.
Right.
But that progression, that idea of like, let's just try the next one and we'll see how it goes.
Right.
Let's try the next one.
No one's making you do it,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. I've never, the way you pitched that, I've never heard of that concept. So circling back, you had already, your Reli Title, we can go into that in depth later, but you're in business, you go on this adventure. Mm-hmm. How did that change your acumen and your business and how you approach just everyday life?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm not a very patient person. I've never had any patience. It's been, and in some ways I wonder if I'd have been a better business person or more successful had I had patience. On the other hand, it's like, I don't have any, and I'm pretty happy with what, how everything ended up.
Yeah.
So maybe I wouldn't have been successful if I had a lot of patience. But that seems to be a weakness. And one thing about these adventures, you can't force your way up these mountains. You can't force the weather to do what you want it to do. You're at the mercy of nature and the weather and the mountain conditions and all that kind of stuff. So you really... One thing I've always noticed about the guides that I went with was how patient and calm they were, no matter what the circumstance, where I was always way more emotional and way more, wanting to force everything and wanting everything to happen immediately. And so I really learned from them, is that you can't get your way all the time whenever you want something to happen, and you have to let things work their way out. And so I came back from those trips a lot calmer. And I also came back with the feeling that no matter what happens at the office, it's not an avalanche on Everest.
Yeah.
It's
that's a pretty extreme thing. Yeah.
It's not life or death.
Yeah.
And it's important, but there's nothing that can come up day to day in my business that can compare, to some of the things we went through. So it just gives you a much better perspective, I think, on, hey, let's just don't get too crazy over something that goes wrong. Let's just relax and try to fix it.
Yeah, it's not to say you don't want to do excellence and you don't want to keep a high standard in your businesses and how you operate, but you're right. Like, it puts in perspective life and what really matters.
Right.
Like, I remember I was a server a long time ago at Red Robin, and when some of the servers, there was an older server who, had been in the industry for a while, and some of the young people, including myself, when it gets busy, you kind of get worked up and you're like, I'm stressing, and you're trying to move burgers. And she would just be like, everybody calm down. It's just burgers and shakes.
Yeah.
And it was just this thing of like, keep it in perspective. Like, we're giving people food. If it's out another minute late, like, it's no reason to be yelling at people or treating people unkind, But
great.
it always laughed me up.
Yeah.
It made me laugh because she's like, it's just burgers and shakes. People
Right.
just chill out.
Just closings and titles, right?
Yeah. So let's circle back. So you are in the title company business. You started Reli Title, which was a different title company, but Reli itself started in '96, correct?
Correct.
And now you've expanded to 18 locations all across Alabama. And basically, when we talked, I was like, hey, I would love to have someone from title come in. And you're like, title itself is not the, most intricate, sexy topic, but I do know business.
Yeah.
And then we had a great conversation about what business is and all that kind of stuff. So talk me through kind of what your company does and kind of how it started and, the morphous to, today.
Well, I got into the title business completely by accident. I think a lot of people do end up in an industry where they didn't really plan to be that way. I had a law degree and was practicing law and really wasn't interested in practicing law and was kind of floundering around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And really, I got a call from a fraternity brother who worked for a mortgage company. And he said, we're having trouble getting our closings done on time, and would you want to do them? And I said, no. Sounds awful. I don't want to do that. Because at that time, I kind of saw myself as like a trial lawyer and somebody that would be in front of a jury and exciting work. But I had to pay the bills. I was on my own, and so I started doing the closings really just as a way to keep the office afloat. And it was a blessing because it was more like a business. It wasn't really practicing law per se. It was really more like running a business early on, and it still is. And so I liked that. I liked that aspect of it. And so over the last 43 years now, it's just been trying to build on that. And the whole branch system that we have, there was never a master plan to do that. What happened was, we were doing a pretty good job in Birmingham. One of our clients wanted to open a branch in Montgomery. They said, hey, would you consider opening a branch of your firm down there too, do our work? Okay, so that's how that started. And then, so the branches got started that way, basically following good clients to different markets and servicing them and then trying to grow, organically once we got there.
It was very people-based. It wasn't
Absolutely.
based upon we have this plan. I find that a lot of businessmen and women who are very successful are opportunity finders and not necessarily they seize an opportunity, if you will. They're not necessarily yeah, we're going to do this and this. I mean, there's strategy, don't get me wrong, but they're also just observant of opportunities. Right.
And that's the story of Reli's growth. Most of our branches that we have now started because we got a call from somebody in a market where we weren't there, and they either said, would you consider putting an office here because the lawyers here aren't, they're on their schedule, not on our schedule. Or we've gotten a call from someone that worked for one of those law firms that said, I understand you've got branches, and I'd really like to talk to you about me being a manager for you in Aniana or some of the smaller Winfield, Alabama, or,
right.
Wherever. And so that's where a lot of our branches got started. It was people that worked for a firm. They were doing all the work. They were getting none of the credit. They were underpaid, underappreciated. And so we gave them an opportunity to get out of that life and into a role where you're your own boss, for the most part. You're running your own office, within our framework and within our way we do things. And then you've got destiny, you've got your own destiny in your hands, so to speak. And that's really been the way we've grown mostly over the last, 27 years. And it's great because we don't say we have to have an office in this market. It's really more of, if there's an opportunity, we don't really care where the market is. If there's a great opportunity and we can associate with a great person, we'll go there.
Yeah. Were there ever opportunities that you pulled back from, and it hit 3 of your check boxes, but not all 5, or whatever your system is of saying, yes, this is a good move for us to move forward? And if so, why were, Why'd you pull back?
Yep, it happens a lot. It could have been a lot of things. It could have been we just didn't feel like it usually comes down to the person. I've always felt like that if we have the right person, we can be successful anywhere. I've got some managers at Reli that I could put on the moon, and I'm convinced they would do well. Yeah. That's just the way they are. That's their work ethic, the way they do things. And so I know I could plug them in anywhere, and in a matter of a pretty short period of time, they would get the business because they're that good. So it usually comes down to if we really have, we call it a high five rule. We used to have at Reli where if we don't find somebody, if we don't high five each other about the person, then we don't move forward. Mm-hmm. If there's any question, if there's any doubt, we don't need at this stage in our business, we don't need the distraction of a failure. So it has to be a home run pretty much across the board before we want to move forward.
Right.
We don't want to gamble with a branch at this point. You
don't need to. So
no, it's got to be a sure thing. Yeah. Nothing's sure thing, but we've got to feel like it's a sure thing. Yeah.
And I mean, you have 18 branches at this point. You kind of know what the sure thing, what has panned out. And I'm sure you've had some ones that you tried and they didn't pan out early on. And then you said, okay, let's break this apart. And why did that not work? And then you can kind of
I think we've got 22, but
Oh yeah,
22. I don't know.
You're like, 75.
I don't know.
Sure.
Don't hold me to it.
Good.
It seems like it's over 20, but
yeah.
Maybe
and
not.
that might have been,
or you may know something I don't know.
No. I mean, I think I wrote it down in my notes, but that might have been a different,
Yeah, maybe in Alabama. Yeah, maybe in Alabama.
So
I don't know.
Retrospect on that idea of high five and all that kind of stuff. What do you feel like are some of the culture things that have been key for you guys through the growth, and the things that you kind of, it's been described to me as like the sacred cow, the idea of like, you can change a lot of the method, but the message has to stay the same. And what are some of those core things that have helped you guys grow and helped you guys keep the culture of Reli strong? Well,
it really comes down to a love of people and wanting to partner with our clients to help them be successful. I think if you're genuine, and it's got to be genuine, you can't fake this, and the best managers and leaders we have are people that are genuine. They're not faking anything, and the clients know that they're on their side. If you can convince the clients, I'm on your side. We are a team. I want this thing to get to the closing table as badly as you do, and I'm going to do everything I can do to make that happen, rather than you're just another transaction or another number.
Yeah.
And the people that, and I think you're kind of either born with that in a way or you're not. I mean, I'm not sure it can be taught, so we look for people that have that quality, that they're just really, and the work ethic, so you get that quality and you combine it with a strong work ethic. And man, that's hard. That's a hard combination to beat. It's almost a sure thing if you can get those two things. And so that's what we look for in our managers.
Yeah. The work ethic thing is so huge, and it's definitely something that growing up, I kind of transformed my view on what work ethic versus talent. I think early on in my years, I felt everyone around me is just really talented, and I didn't have, I had this scarcity mindset. And as life kind of went on, I kind of was like, no, like most people, work ethic and trying hard and getting up, and, from what people consider failure is just a learning lesson.
Right.
It's way more about that. The successful people are just doing that. And the talent is maybe 5-10% of the thing.
Work beats talent.
Yeah.
Every time.
Every time. It's so like I'm walking my son through this in a very practical way. So he does math. He doesn't love math, but he's good at it. But because when he doesn't like it, he doesn't try as hard, and it's a struggle for him. And so he thinks he kind of tells himself, I'm not good at math. And when he tries, blazes through stuff. And so we had a problem. One night we're working through math stuff, and it took like maybe 15 minutes to get through this problem, and I knew that it's just a long day. It's so hard for kids, right? Long day. I was just like, hey, let's just take a break and we'll tackle it in the morning. So same exact problem, was number 2, but pretty much the same type of problem. And we did it in a minute. And I said, hey, who is the boy that did that one? And he's like, me. And I was like, who's the boy who did number 2? And he's like, me.
Right.
And I said, how long did it take each one? He said 15 minutes. And the other one, I said, how fast did you do that next one? He was like 1 minute. I was like, what's the difference? And kind of walked him through, and he was like, it was your attitude in trying. Mm-hmm. No different.
Right.
You didn't wake up with a totally different brain.
Yeah.
Or more knowledge about math.
Right.
You just literally reset and approached it from a problem solving I can attitude and that work ethic and that. So I think the culture, that's one thing that we talked about a lot, was culture is just so key to that. So let's dive into, the nuts and bolts, the unsexy part of title work briefly, so that at least people kind of understand the process and all kind of that kind of stuff. So basically, in a nutshell, why do we need title work, and what is that for in a real estate transaction?
Yeah. Well,
30,000 foot view.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because if we get too detailed, you're talking to the wrong guy.
Yeah. No, we don't have to get super detailed.
Yeah. So, it's most people's biggest investment. You're spending a lot of money on a home or any real estate that you purchase. Okay. And the last thing you need is to find out after you've closed and you've spent all this money on something, which is maybe your largest transaction you'll ever make, that you don't own it, or that there's a claim on it, or there's an issue. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it can be devastating to people. And if you don't have title insurance, there's really nowhere to turn. You're on your own. And so even though the claim percentage on title claims is pretty low, it's still, for the amount of money you pay up front, one-time premium, and it protects you for the entire time you own the property, it's quite a bargain, really. And, I would never buy a piece of property without it. And so that's my, endorsement of it. But a lot of things can happen that you don't expect. Say 10 years ago, Uncle Fred forged his wife's name to the deed. Or
Uncle Fred's the worst.
Uncle Fred. You got to watch Uncle Fred.
There's always an Uncle Fred in every family.
And Uncle Fred's dead,
Yeah.
But one of the heirs, knew about that, and now all of a sudden shows up on your doorstep later and wants you out of his house, Yeah. So that's just one, example of many things that could happen. But you just can't play around with that. I mean, it's too big a deal, and you can't afford to spend that kind of money on something and then have a life-changing event where you would lose it. So the title is there to protect you from those kind of things happening. On the lender side, they're loaning money on it. They're loaning money on that house. They have to make sure that they have good collateral. So they're not going to loan money unless they know that the titles that they're protected. Should something like that come up. So that's the basic reason you buy title insurance. And it's there's talk about Biden said last night he's going to do away with title insurance on refinances. We'll see how that works. I don't think that's going to happen, frankly. It's just too much risk, for lenders to loan money on property. We don't know what's happened between the time the people bought the house and then the time they go to refinance. There could be, a variety of issues, liens or judgments, tax liens or other mortgages. You just don't know without doing a new title policy.
Yeah, so I actually had a property that I bought for a flip. Purchased it cash up front out of my own funds, but I like to use other people's money ultimately. But at the time, I did not have a private money lender lined up. And so, have the property, we started the reno, was still talking to private money lenders and lined one up about 2 months after the, project had closed and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that was proposed. And this was kind of a new private lender, kind of still trying to figure out the ins and outs of it. And they were like, do you want a title policy? And on this one, I was like, here's the deal. I just got a clear title 2 months ago.
Right.
That said, I'm a big trust but verify. And if you feel like, that you can't trust that in that 2 months, I could have gone out and put a different private money loan on it and she would be not aware of it, right?
Right.
So I was like, for the sake of this relationship, for the sake of your security in what has been done to this property, I'm telling you I haven't done that.
Right.
But I'm going to verify it. And that's what the title policy did. They went back, they repulled everything, and they said, nope, Todd has not put any loans, no mechanical liens have been put on the property, and we move forward with the deal. So it is a verifying. You can always trust,
right?
But you got to verify. And like you said, even on the refi, even if they're a year, 2 years apart, Uncle Fred could have done something crazy, right?
Yeah.
Or you brought in a contractor and you didn't pay them, and then that contractor's disgruntled and they put a lien on your property, which they can do.
Sure.
So, it does protect ultimately everybody involved with that transaction. And I think it's essential to the trust of our industry really moving forward. It has to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you want to have total confidence in the system, if you're investing in real estate. And it's just another way to let you know that your investment's safe.
Yeah.
Whether you're lending money on it or whether you're buying it, for your personal use or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I mean, and you might not even have known. It's not like you went and maybe did something to the property that would have caused a lien. There could have been something pop up that you're not even aware of. So, so that was smart on your investor's part and your part, really, to give him the peace of mind that the property's in good shape and there's no issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had another client where we were working through, and it was interesting because it was like just a little bit of the phrasing was wrong in the title and wasn't caught. They had bought the property like 3 years before. So it wasn't an Uncle Fred situation, but it was definitely like a hiccup. And they had to go back and get it. And so we went back to the original title policy provider and said, hey, the title's not right. Can you? And it took them like 2 or 3 weeks to get it cleared. And it wasn't, it's because they had to go back to these people and get signatures and then correct it and file that correction. And so there's intricacies that just really, you want the right people in place to handle these big money transactions because it protects your and I agree, for the price point, it's a pennies on the dollar for the risk you're taking if you don't pull title. Right. So let's talk about a little of the industry where it's at now, where you kind of see it going. I know we talked about like in the Anianas and like smaller towns, sometimes you're going down to the courthouse to pull records. They're not digitized, just different things like that you see, hopefully the industry moving towards, but are still, some old stuff happening, kind of where do you see it progressing?
Yeah. Well, we do have some counties in Alabama that are still not online. I'm not sure the number right now. I don't do that on a daily basis, but most counties that we deal with are online. We can get most of the information from our office. We don't have to go to the courthouse. But sometimes that information only goes back to a certain day. So if there's something we need that's before that, we've got to physically go or send somebody to go or contract out for somebody to go and pull that dusty book out, and look through it. And, if you think about how archaic that is compared to other industries, the title industry is probably further behind anybody, but that's kind of good because it's ripe for disruption, and the thing that, the company that we're now associated with, Acrisure, which, I've got on my jacket here, we partnered with Acrisure in 2000. And so now we are part of the largest title agency in the country, Reli is. It gives us a lot of advantages, strength in numbers. It's the largest title company in the country. And it has a full AI department that is working 24/7 while we're doing what we do to try to figure out how to do it more efficiently.
Yeah.
And don't know what that's going to look like, and I don't really worry about it because I used to worry about, before I partnered with Acrisure, my two biggest fears as a business owner was, one, my competitor, I don't see the local companies that much as they're competitors, but they didn't keep me up at night. What kept me up at night was competing against the national companies. They're the ones that had the ability to come up with the next way of doing things that I couldn't afford to do, and we could be obsolete overnight. And technology kept me awake because we didn't have the money at Reli, a little family business, to innovate like a national, $30 billion company could.
Right.
So by partnering with Acrisure, it cured both of those fears. Number one, we're now bigger. Acrisure is bigger than most of the underwriters. And then two, they've got this incredible technology and AI division that is working every day to try to figure out how to streamline the whole closing process. And so I don't have to worry about that anymore. I just worry about what we do and let them do their thing. And then when they come up with the next best method, we'll adopt it.
That's awesome.
So it takes the worry off, and it takes a lot of wasted time off my table. And it allows us just to do, we're constantly trying to improve our process and how we do things to be more efficient. But at the end of the day, it's keeping the clients happy, and it's those relationships. And it gives us time to really focus on that, focus on the customer, focus on the client, and not have to worry about things we can't really control.
It will be interesting, this disruption of AI and what it does to all different types of industries, right? And, you will never replace this.
Right.
As much as we try, like us sitting down, having a face-to-face conversation, there's just something, the human connection, there's something about it that it can't do. But can AI do more in the space of repetitive tasks?
Right.
So we can do more of this.
Yes.
And I think that's even like when you think about social media and all these different techs, like they should be my filter for if I let a tech in my life is, does it drive more of connection or disconnection? And if it's driving more disconnection with my family or with friends or, business partners, then I don't want it. But, Slack, a great technology that is messaging services and all that, it drives more connection and provides more collaboration. And so I use it all the time,
right.
But I limit my Instagram content, honestly, because I feel like personally, now for other people it may be different, but personally, I feel like it isolates me. It does not help me reach out to a friend and text them, hey, how are you doing? It's this quick, like, artificial moment of like, oh, they just had a baby.
Right.
Yeah. Versus like, oh, I should, if it doesn't push me to text that person and say, hey, congratulations about your baby. Right. Then it's isolating, in my opinion. And so AI will be interesting in your industry, how it helps you provide better customer service and more connection.
Yeah, I agree, and that's really where it's headed. It will aid the communication because there's so many moving parts on the closing side, and if we can automate that to where there's less chance of error, number one, less chance of miscommunication, those kind of things, and and I see it happening, just like from a homeowner's insurance standpoint, for instance, Acrisure is one of the largest insurance brokers in the world. Well, we're already doing the closing. The buyer has to have homeowner's insurance. No one ever really thought about mining that information in order to help them. And it's a service to the customer because they've got to go out and get it anyway. And so what are they going to do? They're going to call their old agent or whatever. They may not know that there's options available and different quotes. And if they can click one button and get 5
because you already have the specs on the house.
We already have the specs on the house. We already know the sales price. We already know.
Yeah.
So if they can click one button that comes from us and get a quote from Geico and Prudential and, State Farm and Chubb or whoever in a matter of 5 seconds and then can choose the one they want, that's another, it's income producing for us that we never had before. Right? I mean, we were never in the homeowners insurance space before, and it's a huge convenience to the customer. So it's kind of a win-win-win.
Yeah.
And we don't have to sit around waiting on the insurance binder
Yeah.
anymore. So that's just one example of what's possible when you really understand the transaction from start to finish and can figure out a way to make it as seamless as possible.
Yeah. Where do you see with that, I mean, you know, technology is some of it, but also just industry, how agents, closing attorneys, title companies, all of these blend together to make a transaction happen, transaction coordinators. Where do you see some of that collaboration heading in our industry?
Boy, that's a really good question. You know, the transaction coordinators are worth their weight in gold, and we love the ones we work with.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, so, you know, I would encourage any agent that does, you know, significant volume to, if you don't already have that, you know, because it sure can make things a lot easier. It's almost like the transaction coordinator is in a way kind of a primitive form of AI. They're serving that function that, you know, and who knows what that role is going to look like down the road. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the role of the agent is going to look like. I think the value that the agent brings to the transaction is huge now. What would make it not that valuable? Well, I mean, if all the information and all the process of buying a house is automated, then it's going the value the agent's going to bring is really the knowledge of the market. You know, to me, that's the most valuable agents I work with and that I see are the ones that know what's going on in the market before Zillow knows.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they know what houses are coming on the market. They know things that the average person wouldn't know in that market, and I think that's what makes them really valuable.
It'll be interesting because a lot of this AI is somewhat predictive, but it also still is reactive to the data it's fed, right?
Yeah.
And I met with a couple who does Airbnb, and they were talking about their pricing and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of technologies out there that will do, you know, map your pricing for you, and you can sign up and all that. They said the problem with that is they don't think enough in advance, and they pull indicators from other people organically raising or lowering their prices, which is from people who are in the market with market knowledge.
Right.
And they know that, like, you know, in the scheme of this Auburn game, we'll say they had some in Auburn, right?
Yeah.
And they know that there is this is a very out there idea, but just like there's two schools playing and there's a recent article of a contested moment between two players, and this is just starting to become like a feud. And so this game all of a sudden is becoming this big thing that everybody wants to be at.
Right.
The AI is probably not going to be able to predict those nuances of human.
I see, yeah.
You know, but they know in the community, everybody's talking about this game.
Right.
We need to raise prices for our Airbnbs because this game, for whatever reason, in this moment is viral and is going to be just really, really popular.
Right.
And so they raise their prices, and then all the, you know, AI technologies say, oh, wait, what's happening? All these organic people are raising their prices. Okay, we'll do it. And so then there's a lag effect.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I think agents will provide the value they have to rely on more and more is specific market knowledge. And to a degree, you know, growth of businesses in general, like your business, everything is going to have to be more boots on the ground in the weeds with people to understand the nuances that technologies can't.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting about the Airbnbs. I guess, you know, if you know Taylor Swift's coming to town,
Yeah.
you know, that should be readily available information, but does the algorithm know that?
Right.
You know, and
or does it interpret that is going to make these prices jack
triple,
up?
You know, or whatever the case may
yeah.
be. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it'll be, but I agree. It's all of this is changing our markets. AI is definitely, you know, moving and shifting. I liken it to there was an article, we talked about this on the podcast a while ago, and there's an article about New York Times was suing ChatGPT and another AI platform. I can't remember. You know, because they do what's called scraping, which is pulling data from these sites, and they use it to feed data to their AI platform. And so they're suing them over it. And I likened it to, like, the stable that was taking care of the horses suing, Ford Motor Company. It's like, you're not stopping the automobile.
Right,
it's too powerful. It's too strong. It can innovate and just change complete industries. And we're just on the tip of the iceberg. It's eventually going to win.
Right.
You're just delaying the process.
Yeah,
and you're trying to hold on to something.
It's similar to the music industry when Napster came out.
Yeah.
You can deny it's there. You can try to legislate it out of business. You can try to sue it out of business. You can do everything you can. But if the technology is good enough, you're going to lose. And it had the music business figured that out and adapted to it and started Spotify before Spotify did, where music stream. I mean, just an example of they did everything they could to try to put that out of business and that way of people sharing music and owning music, not really owning it, but listening to it. Yeah. And it was just never going to work.
The cat was out of the bag.
It was just too good, Yeah. And so now they finally figured it out, and now they figured out how to make money on streaming music. But there for a while, I mean, it was deny, turn your head in the sand. It'll go away, but it was never going away.
Yeah, I would agree. So you went through this whole process, like you said. You got acquired by Acrisure, kind of changed ownership there and all that kind of thing. But we had talked. Acrisure was not the first company to approach you.
No,
it happened a lot. I mean, you had multiple locations, obviously a powerhouse in this space of title work. Talk me through that journey of, being approached by different companies, filtering, yes, no, why, what, I'm sure the first one felt flattering. You're like, oh, I could sell if someone wants to buy us. Like I've built something that someone else values.
Yes. Oh, it was very flattering. I mean, I think the first suitor was a regional bank. I won't mention who it is, but who was already in the title space. They had inherited a title company through acquisition and didn't really know how to run it. And they saw, Reli was in their footprint of, 8 or 9, 10 states they were in. And they said, well, we can acquire this company. They've got good management and they kind of know what they're doing. And then they can, and it made sense for them, made a lot of sense for them. And that was the first suitor. And over, about a year, 18-month period, I probably had, 40 NDAs and 40 groups come and go, from private equity to national title underwriters to banks to family funds to, ran the gamut. But and they were all super flattering and very, it was fun for me to listen to them, but none of them really had a vision for what Reli could be and where they wanted to take it that I felt like is where we wanted to go. It would have been in like the private equity world. It was all about, spreadsheets. I know enough to know that's not where you want to go.
Yeah.
And my partner at the time had been through a private equity buyout in his old company and had, really bad taste about that. So we were pretty skeptical on some of them. But, out of the blue, I got a call from the CEO of Acrisure who said, hey, we know about your company. I'd like to fly down and spend 2 hours with you. And, by that time, I was like almost giving up that we were ever going to find a perfect scenario. But he came down and spent 4 hours, and everything he said was exactly what we were looking for. Let us do our thing, bring the strengths of this huge company to support us, but don't try to change our culture. Don't try to change how we do things. Don't change our name. Don't change, leave us alone for the most part. And his strategy was, why would we want to mess with you?
It's been working.
We like it the way it is. Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And, he said, you'll have an offer by the end of the week, by Friday. And sure enough, we did. And it was, a really great decision. And so it's been they've done everything they said they would do. They've helped, like I said, I don't worry about those things that could put us out of business anymore. Yeah.
They leverage their because they're doing it across the board for all their other title companies. So It makes sense. Right. The ratio of R&D to implementation is far greater
Yes.
than you could have done on your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's just peace of mind knowing that, we can make decisions, really long-term decisions, and not have to make, immediate changes just for the sake of change. So it's been a really good marriage, and, I'm still here. I don't have to, my contract was over 2 years ago, so I could have left then, but I'm just excited about where I think this is going, and I want to see it through. So I'm having more fun now than I've had in a long time, really working every day.
It's kind of great, like I've thought this whole journey of financial freedom and basically going on a journey of getting the opportunity to do what you want to do every day, that I've done in my own personal investments. And the more I do it, I realize that I will probably I may slow the pace at some point in my life.
Yeah.
But I probably will never stop because the journey is what is fun.
Yeah.
The journey is what is enjoyable. And like we think the end goal is kind of the reason why. But then when we hit the end goal, we're like, well, what's next? And talk to me about, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, business people in your position, some people will look at it and say, when is enough enough?
Yeah.
And that idea that you have come to a place of like, no, what is that for you as like why you're still here after 2 years of when you could have, left your contract? You know, what's the deep thing in you that continues to drive for this business and just in general, working on things?
Yeah, because everybody says, oh, once I hit this number or once I acquire this, I'm going to sit on the beach all day and do nothing. It's just not my personality. I'm not happy doing that. And so it's all about being happy. If I wasn't happy coming to work, I surely wouldn't be doing it, if I didn't enjoy it, if I didn't get something out of it. And, frankly, the team that we built at Reli is strong enough where I can go wherever I want to go in the world and spend as long as I want being away from the office, and I don't have to worry about it. My wife and I have been on, some of these long expeditions where we don't even have cell service, for weeks at a time. And, I'm not really worried about what's going on at the office. And so I've kind of got the best of both worlds now, is that I don't have to work. I don't have to go in. I can go wherever I want and travel and do whatever we want to do. But I'm really enjoying it. And, I'm working on kind of some special projects now. So I'm not really involved that much in the day-to-day operation anymore, which is great because it gives me a lot of flexibility. Yeah. So now I'm working on, can't tell you what they are yet.
Yeah. He's like, not on air. Okay.
But not on air. But I do have a couple special projects that I'm working on that are incredibly fun for me. I like building new things. I like putting deals together. I like numbers. I like projections. I like all of that. And then once it's up and operating, and I just like leaving it alone and then going to the next deal. So I'm kind of in that mode right now, which is really fun. I don't know how much longer it'll be interesting to me. Maybe a month, maybe 2-3 years. I don't know. But I don't really see myself doing this in my 70s. Maybe. But if I can't find anything I'd rather be doing, then I'm going to do this. And so it's really been great. I'm enjoying it like crazy. And when we did the deal with Acrisure, if you'd told me I would still be here by now, I would have said you're crazy. And here we are. Yeah. And it's been almost 4 years.
That's awesome. I think back to, that whole acquisition period in time, 40 plus people saying, hey, we want to buy your business, showing you big numbers, I'm sure, small numbers, some of them not.
Some were small, yeah.
And you said, I think we're done here. But, and we go back to the idea of the Kilimanjaro journey, and the big takeaway was the patience. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you hadn't gone on that journey as a person, if the journey as a business and the acquisition, that patience wouldn't have been there potentially. Mm-hmm. No one will know. Yeah. Obviously, but it is interesting how one skill set builds on the next and kind of prepared you to make a jump that obviously has been very beneficial, mutually beneficial.
Right. Now that's an interesting take on it. I'm glad that none of the suitors that came before, I'm glad that no one threw a crazy number out there. The worst thing would have been a scenario where the money would have been so high that it would have been impossible almost to turn down, yet I knew that it wasn't the best thing long-term for our employees.
Yeah.
It wasn't the best thing long-term for the legacy of Reli. That would have been very tough. Fortunately, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so the
You're
number,
like, if there was $1 billion in front of it,
yeah. Everybody can fend for themselves, But
it comes a point in time.
It comes a point. But so it really, I was lucky in that it worked out that way. Where the
That's
company
cool.
that really saw the value of what Reli is the one I wanted to partner with, and so that's why they're so successful, because they understand what companies are worth. They're experts at that, and they can see things. They don't nickel and dime people. They don't try to get a bargain at your expense. They truly understand what a business is worth. And that's what they pay, which is all I really was looking for from the very beginning, was that plus what's your vision for the company. And if those don't marriage, then we'll just hang on to it,
I love what you said too, and we talked about it offline about it, was the culture, taking care of the people that existed in your organization. And then, like you said, had vision for the future of the growth and all that kind of stuff. Not just like, okay, we're just buying another plug and play. Like, no, we want to buy and grow.
Right.
And it comes back to, caring, ultimately caring about that transaction, caring about that transfer, that the people that you had brought up all those years in your company would still be taken care of, even in any transition.
Well, look, I'm smart enough to know that the secret of success is in those people, I mean, I've got people that have been there over 25 years. That's their life, it's their family outside their real family. And to do something, to have sold the company to somebody that would have totally disrupted the way we do things and our core values and our, family atmosphere and all those kind of things would have really been a slap in the face to them. And so that was really important, that we, not to say that there aren't some changes. I mean, anytime you're acquired by a company of this size, they're going to want to consolidate a lot of back office services, and they're not going to, they own 750 businesses. They're not going to want everybody to be on a different software, a different payroll system, a different accounting system, So there are a lot of things we've had to adapt to, but I don't think the average employee at Reli sees much of that. It's really more of the operations people at Reli deal with that every day, and we've tried to keep the disruption at a minimum, to the average Reli employee.
That's good.
In fact, we didn't even tell anyone in the company that we had partnered with Acrisure for 8 months after it closed.
Oh, wow.
And that was by design, because, when people get acquired, they start thinking the worst. Everything's going to change, and they're going to send somebody down from New York to be my manager, And so we just felt like, let's let some time go by, let them see that nothing changed. And then we can go break the news and say, oh, by the way, it happened 8 months ago. Have you noticed anything different? And of course, no one had. And so that was kind of an easy way to transition.
Yeah. That's great. That's a very interesting way to approach it from that standpoint of setting them up for success, So one thing that I like to do out at the end of every year is ask myself the question, what one thing, if it got better, would make everything better? And my question to you is, in the growth process of your business, as a businessman, I'm sure you ran up against ceilings of like growth or issues, and you had to work through those, and then you probably saw exponential growth. But there were probably moments when you had a ceiling, right? And what were the things that you felt that you improved or fixed or adjusted to hit that next like level of growth? Like, what were the bottom slat issues that you just kept running up against and you had to fix before you could grow? I'm not asking easy ones.
No, it's not easy because I don't know that the way I started and ran this thing and the way we've done it really fits the mold of most businesses, and that there was never really a path. There was never really a goal path.
Yeah.
There was never really I've got to have X number of offices by this day. It never worked that way. It was so organic and natural the way it grew that I never really thought about it. I never really wasted any time thinking about it. Now, looking back on it now, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change much because it worked.
Yeah.
But I could have easily been twice as big as we are. I could have easily been, 20 offices in Tennessee and 5 offices in South Carolina and more offices in Florida. If I had to do over again, would I take a little more risk and try to grow it to that level? Probably so. I think maybe even though my nature has always been somewhat of a risk taker, not anymore. I don't take any risk anymore. I've changed completely. But in my younger days, I would gamble. I was a gambler. I was a risk taker, which I think you have to be when you're young. That's the time to fail.
Yeah.
It's easy. You don't want to fail after you already have everything. You want to fail when you don't have anything, So I think if I had it to do over again, in all honesty, I would have been a little more aggressive, would have grown the footprint bigger. It would have caused a lot more problems. It might have blown the whole thing up, right?
Right.
But I think looking back on it, we could have handled it. And by the time I finally did the deal, we might have been twice as big, and maybe just as successful, or, but twice as big. So that's what I would change. But again, I never really, maybe I should have sat down and mapped it out like you're suggesting, but I just never did. It never occurred to me. I really didn't have a blueprint. I didn't really have anybody that mentored me. I didn't really have someone in this industry that I looked up to because I didn't know anybody in this industry. So we had to invent, trial and error, a lot of it on our own. Yeah. And I wouldn't change it, but I don't know if that answers the question. But
I think it's a great feedback because everybody's journey is different, like a fingerprint. Everybody's journey is different. But the thread that I hear is consistently is bringing in the right people.
There's no
and
question.
Letting those people, empowering them to help the growth and help find the gaps. And it seemed like through that journey, you probably were just very successful at recruiting and vetting the right people to keep the culture good, to keep the growth good, and to do it in a way that really built a really great business.
Probably the number one, the most important factor. And probably if I have a talent, it's that I have been able to, for some reason, attract really high quality people that are great employees, great partners, great friends. That's been the secret sauce of the whole thing. And, we didn't always bat 1,000,
No one does.
No one bats 1,000, But I will say that the culture right now at Reli is the strongest it's ever been. I think the atmosphere and just everything about it is the highest it's ever been, even though times are a little slower, right now. Market's not what it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Really? I didn't notice.
Yeah.
My bank account does. But.
So there's a little bit, the pessimism is going to sneak in a little bit, but that's been the number one factor. And I'm really proud of the people we were able to convince to come on board, and they've stuck with me all these years. A lot of long-term employees.
That's great. Last question before we close. Let's talk about, you do a lot of transactions. The market is has tapered off a lot because of interest rates, a lot because supply is low.
Right.
And low interest rates or high interest rates don't help low supply. Where do you see kind of the market trends and kind of, what you're seeing from a standpoint of doing a lot of transactions, those trends peaking up? Are we looking at a little bit brighter 2024, or is things still just not quite there?
Well, we're already ahead of last year, in our order count. I was hoping it would be a dramatic upswing. Hadn't really seen that yet. Yeah. It's going to take, anytime there's a really fast interest rate hike like we've had, it takes some time. It takes a lot of time for people, because sometimes, it's hard to move from a 2.5% to a 7% house. It's just not very practical.
Yeah.
But as time goes by, people, their lives change. They need to move for whatever reason, and it'll loosen up, and rates will hopefully continue to trend down. As inflation gets a little more under control. We've got an election coming up, so that's going to have a big thing.
Everybody wants good rates for
a big
elections.
Factor. Yeah, good factor there.
Yeah.
I really think we just had two just crazy years. The two biggest years in my 42-year career just happened. 3 and 4 years ago, 2 and 3 years ago.
Man, say that again.
Yeah, it's two biggest years ever.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. It was ridiculous. I knew it wouldn't last. I've been through too many of these, for 40 years. It's been a lot of ups and downs. I've been through the 2008 debacle, which, was in some ways worse. And it just so happened, we hit COVID thinking, I remember walking into my president's office every day when COVID first hit, and we just went like, we did this. It's like we lasted one more day. We thought the doors could close at any minute.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like we made it another day, fired up. And then it ended up being the best year in the history of the company. And then the next year blew it away.
Yeah, and how do you predict that?
You can't predict that.
Yeah.
We went from thinking we might have to lay off 100 people to, we can't do all the business we've got coming in. So, I knew that was never going to last.
Yeah.
Getting back to a more normal market, maybe like 2019, is kind of what we're working on right now in terms of projections and those kind of things. And I think that's probably a good gauge of where we'll be in 24.
Yeah.
I've kind of learned not to worry about, there's going to be peaks and valleys in this business. There's always going to be there. We're so interest rate sensitive. We're so supply dependent. So I've just learned to not worry about things I can't control. If I could control interest rates, they'd be lower. I can't. So I don't worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
And just do the best we can do. We can be successful in any market.
Yeah, there's opportunity, and ultimately when you care, you provide good customer service, you're going to get business.
And we get better. When times are not crazy, it gives us a chance to breathe and to tinker with our process and to always be improving. When you're doing more closings and you have time in the day to do, there's no time to improve. It's just trying to hang on, and get the deal done. And so really, I don't mind times when it slows down anymore. Because it really does give us a chance. It gives everybody a break too. We had people working their fingers to the bone. It was, it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
And so we needed that. Didn't want to slow down quite as much as it did.
It is interesting though with this, I've said it, with this whiplashing of the rates. Like we just need some stability. And as much as personally, yes, it'd be nice if it could go lower. It'd help my business. But at the end of the day, I think from an economy standpoint and a bigger picture, I think it is good that we are kind of holding steady in this season, and everybody's expecting all these rate drops and stuff. And I've said for over a year, I'm like, I wish the Fed would just say, hey, we're going to be at 6 or we're going to be at 7 for the next 2 years. Welcome to life.
Right. Which is still historically low.
Yes, extremely low. Yeah,
people. My first interest rate was 15 7/8, 1981. So and we were happy to get that.
Yeah.
That was actually Alabama bond money, first time home buyer. It was actually under the rate.
Yeah.
We did fine. We made our mortgage payment, and we didn't make a lot of money. And my wife was working for minimum wage at one of the stock brokerage offices, E.F. Hutton, which isn't around anymore. And I was on my own practicing law with no clients and no foreseeable future of ever having any.
Yeah.
So, but we still found a way to have fun and have a great life and make those mortgage payments on that condo that we had. And it was fine. And so we've just been so spoiled. The rates where they are right now, we could live with forever if they would just, like you said, if they were stable.
Yeah. We just need stability in the market so that everybody can kind of calm down a little bit.
Exactly.
And you're right, it's historically low. And I saw, just even this past week, it's so crazy, the mindset, I think, of generation / just way we are in America. And I'm making big claims here, and I realize that, but they bumped up like a quarter point, right? And and like offers on my listings just dropped. And I'm like, the quarter point is not really changing your payment but in people's mindset, they're like, I'm missing out on a lower rate.
Right.
I'm not going to move. I'm going to wait.
Right.
And it's just so interesting how we want to try to maximize, like almost like a stock market investment or whatever. We're looking at this little finite rate,
right,
and thinking it's really going to change your life when $50 to $100 a month extra on your payment is not going to.
And you're not going to be there 30 years.
No.
I mean, some people, but very few.
Yeah. So it's trying to educate people, letting know that rates, yes, they are a little bit higher than they were. Everything is going to be higher for a while compared to COVID.
Right.
Like I saw someone on TikTok, they were like, predicting when rates will be back at 3%. And I just wanted to be like, never. Yeah. I mean, it's this young dude, not in the business for as long as you have been, or, even me, thinking that this is the norm. And it's just like, this is not normal. This was an anomaly, just like 2008,
well, I've learned never to say it's never going to be back, because I would have bet a lot of money years ago that they would never get to 4, I thought that was crazy.
Right.
And there they went to 2.5 or whatever. So I've learned never to say never in this interest rate game. But, we, from a title company standpoint, we make a lot of money on refinances, and they've been non-existent, for quite a while. Yeah. And the way refis come back is when there's a quick drop in rates. So they've been so low, there's nowhere to go. They can't go to zero, So I always wanted rates to go up slowly. Selfishly, I wanted them to go up so they could drop again, because that's when title companies, do really well. Yeah. I didn't expect them to go up overnight, but getting up to 6-7% for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden they go to 4. Well, that's when your phone, you can't answer all the orders coming in, on refis. So
create some breathing room.
So we haven't had a refi boom in a long time. I keep telling people that work for me that are young, that have never been through one, that they're amazing. You've never seen one, but when you finally see one, you'll be shocked at how much business comes in. So it'd be cool to see one of those before I leave again, but I don't think we will.
We may not. Well, I appreciate this conversation. I mean, the depth of knowledge you have on just building businesses, selling your business, life experiences, all that kind of stuff, and ultimately building something that took care of people. And, it's just, I think this is a phenomenal conversation for a lot of different people in stages of their business building process. So I'm super grateful. I've learned like a ton. How can people get a hold of Reli and work with your company and kind of go from there? Well,
our website's reli.us, and my email is kstewart@reli.us. So yeah, I'm at the desk every day. Unless I'm out of the country, I'm there.
Unless you're hiking Kilimanjaro for the second time, right?
So if you get the notice that I'm out of the office, it could be a while, but I will be back.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate the time.
Hey, thank you. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Incredible,
thank you.
So
appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Thank you.